His Majesty and Her Majesty have walked down this line. They're in full view of me now. I can see them very plainly. And they're bending over and shaking hands individually with each one of these veterans. I'm sure their feelings cannot be expressed, the feelings of these veterans. His Majesty is still carrying on, loath to go back to the royal train.
And you weren't supposed to take pictures. And Dad had just got a camera from a local drugstore, and he put $2 down on this little box camera, and he had it with him, and I guess he had it kind of hidden. So he just, stepped forward and got this nice close-up. I would think Dad would be one of the original paparazzis from Thorndale, Ontario.
My father pushed my wheelchair down off the curb onto the street. And so when the King and the Queen came along, of course, they had to speak to this young boy sitting in a wheelchair. And so she said, you're not well? I said, no, I just had an operation. And she said, I do hope that you'll soon be better. And the King came along afterwards, and he said somewhat the same thing. Actually, I'd had a hernia repair at St. Joseph's Hospital.
The block between Wellington and Waterloo and Dundas Street was jammed with 25,000 wildly excited people who shouted and yelled as they welcomed the King and Queen. It was a thundering demonstration of the people's loyalty to the British monarchy. The London Free Press.
We were sitting on Dundas Street where a spot was reserved for our school. Most of my young students had never been to the city before. The smallest child, named Johnny, was lifted up on my shoulders so he could see the King and Queen. After the car passed, he started to cry because he said he couldn't see the Queen. Of course, he had seen her. He just didn't recognize her. Mabel Stanley.
A hush settled over the throng as the car glided to a stop, and K. Grant Crawford, city clerk, handed the visitor's book to Her Majesty, who handed it to the King. As the King took the pen, the veteran in a blue beret cried, "3 cheers for the King," and the silence was shattered. The Toronto Star.
The Queen is lovely. She wore a frivolous little hat and looked just right in it. Her Majesty was charmed with the children. She said she had never seen so many lovely children anywhere. And she had a lot to say about how nice and shady the trees were. Isabella Johnson.
They're standing on the back of the train just as they did when the train arrived.
When the train moved slowly away, and the King bowed and the Queen waved, the heart of London beat warm. And there was a look in the King's eye, as if he meant to say to the Queen, in the silence of their room, "We mustn't forget to tell the children all about London." The London Free Press.
My dad held me up in his arms, and I waved goodbye to them at that time. On our wedding day, on June the 22nd, in 1963, at noon hour, the doorbell rang, and my father answered the door, and he said that there was a parcel there from Windsor Castle, and it was a set of 6 demi-tasse coffee spoons, and the one side was enameled pastel colors, and the other 6 different colors, and the other side was a gold spoon. And I was so excited I couldn't, when I went back to finish getting dressed, I couldn't get my toothbrush and the toothpaste together. I was shaking so much.
Whoever thought that I would, at 16, be seeing the King and Queen in Canada? Nowadays, flying is so common that it's not a surprise anymore. But at that time, and I think it must have been, it was the first time they came to Canada. So what a thrill for me.
Half a century plus a month to the day later, she was again in London, where her grace and charm just made everybody happy as she opened the Veterans Wing of Parkwood Hospital. These 2 visits were 2 of the most pleasurable visits of a long and varied military career. And it was a pleasure to have been part of both of them. and to be a member of Canada's first and finest, the Royal Canadian Regiment, Pro Patria?
Well, I'm English blood, and I think that came to my mind, that they were my countrymen. I was born in Canada, but of English parents, and I was kind of proud to be part of it.
People put quarters on the tracks, the railroad tracks, so as to get squashed by the Royal train. And some people up the line at Shakespeare stayed in Shakespeare just in case. They did stop too, while thousands in Stratford didn't even see them, because the engineer didn't slow down enough in time. And although we didn't see them in any way, I didn't even catch the glimpse the teacher, who was taller, did, of a gracious pink figure. I'll remember it to my dying day.
John P. Fault of Yarmouth County, Nova Scotia, arrived in London too late to see the King and Queen, but he had a happy reunion with his sister, Mrs. Ida F. Brackett, whom he had not seen in 25 years. As they looked at photos in the London Free Press of the royal visit, Mr. Fault exclaimed, "It must have been a great day for London."
I will have to stop talking. The cheers of this crowd here will be much more eloquent than anything I can say to you in the way of...
Three-gun ready. Three-gun, fire.
They're standing on the back of the train just as they did when the train arrived.